The rain came down like God's own verdict that night on Route 34. I was in my study when the call came, but the landline, not my cell, which told me it was serious. Hospitals still use landlines when the news won't wait for voicemail. Mrs. Ellison, this is Yale New Haven Emergency. Your son Jake was brought in about 40 minutes ago. He's stable, but stable. The word practitioners use when they mean alive, but barely. I drove through sheets of rain that turned the world into watercolor. My hands didn't shake. They never do in crisis. That's what 68 years of living teaches you. Panic is a luxury reserved for after. The ER smelled like fear wrapped in disinfectant. Jake lay in Bay 7, his face the color of old paper, one eye swollen shut, a gash above his temple held together with butterfly strips. Sloane sat beside him, her hand on his chest, her face a portrait of concerned devotion. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Mara, thank God you're here." She'd never called me Mara before, always Mom or Mother Ellison. The intimacy felt like an intrusion. What happened? I took Jake's cold hand. He was driving home from a client dinner. The rain. He just lost control. She pressed a tissue to her nose. They said he's lucky. A resident appeared, tired enough to be someone's cautionary tale. He swiped through Jake's chart on a tablet. Concussion, grade 2, some lacerations. We're keeping him overnight. Then, almost as an afterthought, his tox screen came back. Nothing illegal, but he had diphenhydramine and herbal sedatives in his system. Was he taking anything for sleep? Sloane spoke before I could. Just my wellness drops. All natural, chamomile, valerian, passion flower. He's been so stressed lately. The resident nodded, already moving on. Combined with the Xanax his GP prescribed, that's probably what made him drowsy. Not illegal, not really dangerous on its own, but don't mix them. Tell him to pick one or the other. He swiped the chart closed, like ending a conversation. Sloane let out a small sob of relief, leaning into Jake's still form. The performance was flawless. I'd taught enough law students to recognize a closing argument when I saw one. She'd established the narrative, preempted the questions, positioned herself as the devoted wife trying only to help. And the system had nodded and moved on. I stood there in the fluorescent wash of hospital lighting and felt something shift in my chest. Not fear, not yet, but something older, colder. If a system cannot tell harm from wellness, I thought, it does not protect. It simply watches and calls it care. The fall happened on a Tuesday. I'd been reaching for a book on the top shelf when the step stool shifted. One moment steady, the next on hardwood with a sharp pain in my hip. Jake found me 20 minutes later. "Mom, Jesus, why didn't you call 911? "I'm fine, just bruised." But the x-rays said hairline fracture, and Jake said, with Sloane's hand on his shoulder, "You're coming to stay with us." It wasn't a question. Their brownstone in East Rock smelled of lavender, and something sharper, eucalyptus, clinical and botanical, the kind of smell that announced itself as wellness. "We've set up the guest room for you," Sloane said, leading me upstairs, her hand on my elbow as if I might topple. The room was too perfect. Hospital corners on white linens. On the nightstand, lavender in a vase, lemon water, and 3 pills in a porcelain dish. "What are these?" "Your prescriptions. I've set up a system. I'll bring them with your morning and evening tea so you don't have to think about it." "I've been thinking about my own medication for quite some time," I said mildly. She smiled, not warmly. "Of course, but while you're healing, let me help. That's what family does." "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? "Dinner is at 6. I'm making turmeric broth, anti-inflammatory." The door clicked shut with a softness that felt like punctuation. I stood there and looked around. The closet had space for exactly 1 week's worth of clothes. My toiletries had been arranged like soldiers awaiting inspection. In the hallway, the family photos I remembered were gone. In their place, Sloane's wellness testimonials in frames, motivational quotes in millennial script. In the kitchen, my mail, 3 weeks' worth, sat opened on the counter, a post-it in Sloane's handwriting, redirected your mail here for convenience. Hope that's okay. XO. She hadn't asked. Jake appeared, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the 6 weeks since his accident. Mom, you should be resting. I was restless. He shifted his weight. Our easy silence felt different now. Heavy. How are you feeling? I asked. Really? Fine. Good. He rubbed his neck. I'm just tired a lot, and sometimes I forget things, little things, where I put my keys. He tried to smile. Getting old, I guess. You're 42. Yeah. Sloane entered with a tray. 3 bowls of golden broth, steam rising. She set them down with careful ceremony. Here we are. Bone broth with turmeric and ginger. I've been having Jake drink this every morning. She handed me a bowl and tea. The tea smelled like chamomile with something underneath, a faint trace I couldn't quite place. Sweet, slightly bitter. Almond, Sloane said, watching me. Just a hint. I use organic almond milk, better for inflammation than dairy. I took a sip, warm and soothing. Delicious, I said. You must let the house take care of you, Mara. I met her eyes over the rim. Houses don't take care of people, people do. Something flickered across her face. Too quick to name, too deliberate to dismiss. Of course, that's what I meant. But I'd taught rhetoric for 30 years. I knew the difference between what people say and what they mean. The tremors started on Thursday. Small at first, a flutter in my left hand when I reached for coffee. By Friday, mornings felt like swimming through gauze. I'd wake to find Sloane already there, pulling back curtains, setting down breakfast, eggs, toast, green juice, and always the tea, the same faint almond scent. How did you sleep? Fine, I'd lie. Because the truth was, I wasn't sleeping. I was falling into something heavy and dark and dreamless, clawing my way back each morning with my mind thick, thoughts arriving seconds late. Mom seems really out of it this morning, Jake said on Saturday. She's healing, Sloane replied. Rest is crucial at her age. The body needs time to recalibrate. Recalibrate, as if I were a machine, not a woman who'd argued cases before appellate judges. Maybe we should take her back to the doctor, Jake said. Let's give it another week. I've been documenting everything. Her sleep patterns, mobility, mood. But you know how she is about doctors? She was narrating my symptoms before I could voice them myself, positioning herself as the interpreter of my body. That afternoon, while Sloane taught a virtual workshop, I decided to make chicken soup. I was pulling out a cutting board when she appeared, alarm in her eyes. Mara, what are you doing? Making soup. You should be resting. Her hand on my elbow, steering me to a chair. Let me make you tea first. You look pale. I'm fine. You're trembling. I looked down. My hands were shaking, worse than before. The cutting board slipped, clattered. See? You're pushing too hard. She guided me like I was spun glass. Sit, please. I sat. She moved through the kitchen. Kettle on, tin selected, tea steeping. A drop of honey. A splash from an unmarked bottle she kept in the high cupboard. Here, chamomile. With my special blend, it'll help. The almond scent rose between us like evidence. What's your special blend? Trade secret. I lifted the cup, inhaled. Almond, faint, chemical sweet, noted. She smiled, eyes watchful. Herbs from a farm upstate, completely safe. I've been giving it to Jake for months. It's helped so much with his sleep. Has it? Absolutely. He used to toss and turn all night. Now he sleeps through 8, 9 hours. It's been transformative. I opened the app. A loading screen appeared, progress bars, questions half completed. My name was already filled in, Mara Ellison, 68. A note beneath it read, "Cognitive test in progress." Another line made my stomach drop. Caregiver access, enabled. Shared with Sloan Vale, administrator. I stared at the screen, realizing this wasn't a wellness tool for me. It was a monitoring system for her. I placed the phone down very carefully, as if it were listening. That night I lay awake, downstairs, their voices, his seeking, hers soothing. My son was being managed. I was being calibrated. Morning came with tea. I said nothing at all. I set the phone down carefully. Caregiver portal, connected. Tonight, the house wasn't the only thing calibrating me. Jake brought up the will on a Sunday. "Mom, I've been thinking, with your fall and everything, maybe we should review your estate documents. Make sure everything's in order." "Everything is in order." "I know, but..." He glanced at Sloan. "Things change. We were thinking maybe we should simplify it. Make it clearer." "We." The pronoun landed like a verdict. "Clearer for whom?" Sloan closed her laptop. "For everyone, Mara. We just want to make sure your wishes are protected and easy to execute when the time comes. God willing, not for many years. But it's good to be prepared. I'm quite comfortable with legal jargon." "Of course," Sloan's voice was honey, "but Jake and I aren't. And if something were to happen, if you became unable to make decisions, we'd need to act quickly. For your benefit. When you can no longer speak for yourself, we'll speak for you. I'm not incapacitated." "No one's saying you are," Jake said quickly. "We're just planning ahead." He set down a folder. "We've talked to an estate attorney. He suggested updates, including a durable power of attorney." "Someone?" I asked, though I knew. "Me, or Sloan and me, jointly, since you're living with us now." "I'm not living with you. I'm recovering with you. There's a difference." Sloan leaned forward, sympathetic. "Think of it as estate hygiene, just like updating passwords. It's maintenance, not mistrust. Estate hygiene, as if my life were something needing sanitizing. I'll review the documents, but I'm not signing anything without my own attorney present." "Mom, that's non-negotiable." Sloan's smile never wavered. "Of course, take your time." But the way she said protected sounded like controlled. That night, I couldn't sleep. I'd pretended to drink the tea at dinner, pouring most into the potted fern when Sloan answered the door. I stood up slowly and moved to the cherry wood desk in the corner, the one piece of my old Yale office I'd insisted on saving. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in crinkled, yellowing newspaper, were relics of a life I thought I'd left behind. Lecture notes, student evaluations, and 3 cassette tapes from the years when my mind was sharp enough to dissect lies for a living. Evidence and Ethics, 1997. Forensic Language, 1998. The Rhetoric of Poisoners, 1999. I hadn't listened to them in decades. Now they felt less like memories and more like warnings I'd mailed to my future self. My fingers hovered over the 3rd tape. I'd taught that seminar only once, after a case where a woman slowly poisoned her wealthy mother and nearly got away with it because she'd been so patient, so loving. I found Jake's old boombox in his study and brought it back to my room. With shaking hands, I pressed play. My own voice, younger but unmistakable. "Welcome to Forensic Rhetoric, the Language of Poisoners. We'll examine how individuals who commit slow-harm crimes use linguistic patterns to justify and conceal their actions." I fast-forwarded, stopping at random, then 32 minutes in. Caregivers who poison often use language to moralize doses, phrases like feathering the dose, quieting the edges, lulling the storm. Watch for euphemisms that recast. Harm as help, quieting the edges. I sat very still. 3 days ago, Sloane had handed Jake his morning tea. I'd heard her say, "This should help quiet the edges for you, baby. You've been so wound up." The exact phrase, not similar, exact. A phrase I'd coined 26 years ago, never published, recorded only on this tape. My hands were steady now, perfectly steady, because I was no longer afraid. I was awake. I became a listener. For 3 days, I pretended to drink the tea, pouring it into plants, down the bathroom sink, anywhere but my body. The fog began to lift. My hands steadied. My thoughts sharpened like knives being honed. And I listened. "Let me feather the dose for you tonight, babe. You've been so tense." Sloane, handing Jake his evening tea. Wednesday, 7:47 p.m. "This will lull the hard edges. You'll sleep better." Thursday morning. Jake rubbing his temples, complaining of another headache. "We just need to gentle her compliance a bit more. She's resistant." Friday afternoon. Sloane on the phone in her studio, door half closed. She didn't know I was in the hallway, returning from the bathroom with the careful shuffle of an old woman who knew how to be invisible. Feather, lull, gentle, not common words, not wellness industry jargon. My words. From my seminar. From my voice on that tape. I sat in my room with a notebook. The old-fashioned kind, paper and pen, nothing digital that could be monitored, and made a list. Every phrase, every echo, the timestamps, the context, the targets. Then I did what I'd taught a generation of law students to do. I looked for the pattern in the language. Sloane's wellness blog was public, promoted on every platform. I scrolled through posts on my phone, my ancient professorally trained eye catching the cadence. When we feather our healing protocols, we honor the body's wisdom, lulling the nervous system into coherence, gentling the resistance with botanical allies, the nested triads, the mercy verbs layered over control nouns, the exact rhetorical structure I'd analyzed in my 1999 seminar when discussing how poisoners linguistically justify their actions. She hadn't just heard the tape. She'd studied it. That evening, Jake came to my room. He looked worse than I'd seen him, his skin sallow, dark circles carved under his eyes like bruises. "Mom, can we talk?" "Always." He sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped between his knees. "Sloane thinks. She's worried about you. She says you've been acting strange, paranoid, refusing your medication sometimes." "I haven't refused anything." "She says you poured your tea into the fern yesterday." My blood went cold. She'd been watching. Of course she had. "The tea was too hot," I said calmly. "I was letting it cool." "Mom," his voice cracked, Are you okay? Really? Because if you're having memory problems or confusion, we need to know. We need to help you." I looked at my son, my brilliant, kind, conflict-avoidant son, and saw how thoroughly he'd been turned. Not against me. That would be too simple. He'd been turned against his own perception, taught to doubt what he saw, to trust Sloane's narrative over his own eyes. "Jake," I said carefully, "how do you feel? In your body? In your mind? How do you actually feel?" He blinked. The question seemed to confuse him. Tired, foggy. But that's normal, right? Stress, work, getting older. "You're 42. "Yeah," he rubbed his face. "I don't know, Mom. Sloane says it's just burnout. The drops help. When I take them, I sleep. When I don't," he trailed off. "When you don't?" "I can't sleep at all. I lie awake all night, anxious. The drops fix it." Dependence, I thought. She's created dependence. "Have you seen a doctor?" I asked. "Besides Sloane?" "Sloane is a wellness practitioner. She knows. A medical doctor, Jake. An MD." He looked away. "She says doctors just want to push pharmaceuticals, that we can heal naturally if we trust the process." There it was. Isolation from outside authority. Another pattern from the seminar. Control information. Control validation. Control reality itself. Jake. I took his hand. It was cold. I love you. And I'm not confused. I'm not paranoid. I'm paying attention. There's a difference. He pulled away gently. Sloan said you'd say that. After he left, I sat in the dark and felt the weight of it. How thoroughly she'd built her walls. How carefully she'd laid her foundation. But walls have seams, and foundations have cracks. I just needed to find them. The symbols appeared everywhere once I knew to look for them. On the kitchen calendar, small coded marks appeared in the corners of certain dates. At first, I dismissed them as decorative. Another one of Sloane's curated touches, the kind of bullet journal whimsy she used to make control look like care. But my younger self's voice on the tape had warned. Private journals often encode dosage in innocent symbols, circles, moons, petals. Look for legend pages, the map to the map. I waited until Tuesday, when Sloane had a client consultation downtown and Jake was at the office. The house was mine for 3 hours. I began in the kitchen. The calendar revealed a pattern, the days when I felt clear and myself had been marked one way, and the days when I was at my weakest, fogged, shaking, barely able to think, were marked another. The dates matched too perfectly to ignore. On the nights I'd actually drunk the tea, I woke disoriented and trembling. Those neat little marks hadn't been decoration at all. They were a record of my decline. In the pantry, I found Sloane's row of little glass dropper bottles. Most carried the kind of gentle, polished labels you'd expect from her. Valerian Complex, Sleep Blend, Cortisol Support. But 2 stood out. Their labels were handwritten, small, and uneasy to look at. Quiet 1 and Quiet 2. These weren't products from any wellness shelf. They were her private formulas, and the names felt less like remedies and more like instructions. I photographed everything with my phone, hands steady with purpose. Behind the coffee canister, I found Sloane's hormone tracker, a small spiral notebook she kept for her wellness clients, demonstrating how she tracked her own cycles. But flipping through, I found pages that weren't about hormones at all. Dates, initials, symbols. October 3. She increased my dosage that night, the stronger blend. By morning, I moved through the house like a dulled version of myself, slow and pliant, as if my will had been padded, softened, and tied down. October 5. She gave him only the lighter dose. It didn't hold. He grew uneasy and fidgety, his mind still sparking questions she hadn't meant for him to ask. October 8. I missed the dose that day. Clarity returned like a blade through fog. I was alert, sharp, and no longer docile, a problem she noted with clinical irritation. Increase as needed. M for me. J for Jake. We weren't family in her notes. We were experiments, variables she could adjust at will. My pulse should have raced. Instead, I felt the cold calm of a prosecutor reviewing evidence. This was what I knew. This was my country. Documents, patterns, proof. On the inside cover of the tracker, barely visible, written in pencil, a legend. The first page of her notes held a quiet cipher. No marking meant the subject remained unmedicated. The light dose was meant to blur edges just enough to foster dependence. The stronger dose dulled thought and slowed resistance. And the enhanced mixture, fortified with pharmaceuticals, was designed to override judgment entirely. It wasn't a wellness tracker. It was a dosing code. The notation for the strongest dose, the enhanced mixture laced with medication, was recorded on the night of Jake's accident, October 12th, circled in red, as if she had anticipated the fallout. She'd dosed him with something stronger, and then he'd driven. I photographed the legend page, the entries, every symbol. Then I went looking for the map behind the map. In Sloane's home office, her wellness sanctuary, everything was curated perfection. Cream-colored furniture, succulents in geometric pots, vision boards with aspirational images, abundance, alignment, authority. Her desk was neat, but I'd learned from decades of faculty meetings, neat people have hidden spaces. Tucked behind her row of wellness books, I found a hidden compartment, a slim magnetic strip at the back of the shelf. When I pressed it, a small black notebook slid free, plain and unmarked. The moment I opened it, any illusion of care vanished. Page 1 was a plan, not for healing, but for taking control of our lives, step by step. Stage 1, June to August. Gain Jake's trust. Give him daily supplements until he relied on them. Stage 2, September to October. Bring me into the house. Watch me closely. See how quickly I could be weakened. Stage 3, November to December. Increase the doses. Get legal power over me. Cut me off from anyone who might believe my side of the story. Stage 4, have a doctor declare me mentally unfit. Move me into a care home. Take control of my assets. Below that, she had written the actual dosing instructions. .co.ld. Simple, horrifying. For Jake, a small dose every night to keep him dependent. Increase if he starts resisting. For me, a stronger dose twice a day to fog my mind, weaken my body, and make me easier to control. The handwriting was hers. The language was mine. Words she had taken from my old lectures and twisted into a manual for slow, invisible harm. Standing there in her carefully curated sanctuary, I held proof that this wasn't neglect or overprotection. It was a crime unfolding in slow motion. And in that moment, one truth settled in my bones. Language reveals the hand behind the knife. And I finally saw hers clearly. I called Lila Sethi from a coffee shop 6 blocks away, using their Wi-Fi, not the house internet. Dr. Ellison? Lila's voice was surprised, pleased. It's been years. I need your help, I said, and I need it quietly. We met at the Peabody Museum, in the Hall of Minerals where tourists rarely wandered. Lila looked the same as I remembered, sharp-eyed, unflappable, with the steady competence of a woman who'd spent decades analyzing poisons for criminal trials. You sounded urgent, she said. I handed her my phone. Listen to this first. I played the cassette recording, on my voice from 1999, lecturing on linguistic patterns. Then I played the voice memo I'd secretly recorded of Sloane. This will help quiet the edges for her. Lila's expression didn't change, but I saw recognition in her eyes. That's not coincidence, she said. No, it's not. I showed her the photographs, the legend page, the dosing log, the tracker with symbols, the bottles labeled Quiet 1 and Quiet 2. Lila studied each image with scientific precision. You need a toxicology screen. I need more than that. I need to know what's in those bottles without her knowing. I've tested them. When does she give you the tea? Morning and evening. She watches me drink it. Can you fake drinking it? Swap the bottles? I thought about the fern, slowly dying by the window. I can try. 2 days later, I managed it. Sloane had left the Quiet 2 bottle on the kitchen counter while she answered a phone call. I'd palmed it, replaced it with an identical dropper bottle I'd bought at Whole Foods, filled with harmless valerian tincture. The real bottle I sealed in a Ziploc bag and left in a public locker at Union Station. Lila picked it up an hour later. Her text came the next evening. Call me. Secure line. I walked to the coffee shop again. It's not fatal, Lila said without preamble, but it's not harmless either. Low-dose sedative hypnotics. Zolpidem derivatives, likely crushed tablets dissolved in carrier oil, benzaldehyde for scent masking, herbal components that enhance CNS depression, valerian, Yes, but also skullcap and California poppy in concerning concentrations. Taken daily over weeks, you'd see exactly what you're experiencing: cognitive impairment, motor tremors, dependency, memory issues. And Jake? If he's getting a different formulation, less sedative, more anxiolytic, it would create dependency without obvious impairment. He'd feel he needed it to function. Classic pharmaceutical gaslighting. I closed my eyes. Can you document this, officially? I can write a formal analysis. But Mara, her voice softened, you know what this means. If you report this, it'll destroy your family. She's already destroying it, I said. I'm just making it visible. There was a long silence. People don't always believe older women, Lila said quietly, even with evidence, especially when the accused is young, attractive, and performs grief well. I know. I'd seen it in courtrooms for decades. That's why the evidence has to be irrefutable. What do you need from me? Everything you can give me. Timeline, chemistry, medical projections. I need to build a case so clean they can't dismiss it. You're going to court? Eventually. But first, I'm going to someone who taught me that justice is more than law. I was going to Ruth. Sloane accelerated. I didn't know if she sensed my resistance or if this was always the timeline, but Phase 3 was clearly underway. A neurologist appointment appeared on the calendar. Jake mentioned it casually at breakfast. Dr. Chen can see you next Thursday. Sloane set it up. Just a baseline cognitive assessment. Totally routine. I don't need a cognitive assessment. Mom, you're 68. It's preventive care. I'm a retired law professor, not a dementia patient. Sloane entered with fresh tea, her smile patient. Mara, no one's saying you have dementia, but you've had falls, memory lapses, confusion. We just want to make sure everything's okay. It's what people who love you do. Love. She used it like a weapon. I'll consider it, I said. The appointment's already made. Sloane's voice stayed light, but her eyes were steel. We're all on the same team here. Then why is the bench always warm where I should sit? I asked quietly. The room went still. What? Jake looked confused. It's a legal term, I said, keeping my gaze on Sloane. It means, why is my position already filled before I arrive to occupy it? Why are decisions about my life being made without me? Sloane's smile never wavered. No one's making decisions without you. We're making them for you, because we care. Those aren't the same thing. Jake set down his fork. Mom, why are you being so hostile? Sloane's trying to help. Is she? I turned to my son. Jake, when's the last time you made a decision about your own health without consulting her first? He opened his mouth, closed it. That's not. We're partners. Partners consult each other. Do they? Or does one partner manage while the other complies? Jesus, Mom. Jake stood abruptly. You're being paranoid, just like Sloane said. He left. Sloane and I sat alone in the kitchen with cooling tea between us. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said softly. Am I? Or am I just making it visible? She tilted her head, studying me. For the first time, I saw her mask slip. Just for a second. Underneath was something cold and calculating and utterly sure of itself. You should drink your tea, she said. It'll help you feel better. I don't think it will. Mara. She leaned forward, voice dropping to something almost intimate. I know what you think is happening here. And I understand. At your age, with your health declining, it's natural to feel loss of control, to see conspiracy where there's only care. But fighting this won't help you. It'll just make everything harder. For everyone. Is that a threat? It's a kindness. She stood, took my untouched teacup. One way or another, you'll be taken care of. You can accept that gracefully, or you can make it ugly. But the outcome is the same. She poured the tea down the sink, rinsed the cup with deliberate care. Think about that, she said, and left me sitting alone. I thought about it, and then I called Ruth. Judge Ruth Navarro's chambers smelled like old books and strong coffee. We'd started at Yale together 40 years ago. Two women in a field that didn't want us, building careers through excellence they couldn't dismiss. She was the only person I trusted completely. Tell me, she said, pouring coffee into chipped mugs we'd stolen from the faculty lounge in 1987. I told her everything. Then I played the tapes. Mine from 1999. Sloane's echoes from last week. I showed her the photographs, the legend, the dosing log, the coded calendar. I gave her Lila's toxicology report. Ruth listened without interruption, her judge's face giving nothing away. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. You know what this will do, she finally said. Yes. Jake will have to choose, and he might not choose you. I know. You could lose your son over this. I already have. My voice didn't shake. The question is whether I can get him back. Ruth leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. Legally, you have enough for an investigation. Adult Protective Services, possibly criminal charges. Elder abuse, poisoning, fraud. But Mara, she met my eyes. The system won't be kind to you. You're 68. She's 38. You live in her home. She has documentation showing concern for your welfare. She'll say you're confused, paranoid, that she was only trying to help. I know the playbook. I wrote half of it. Then you know how this ends. Even if you win, you lose. Maybe. I drank the bitter coffee. But if I do nothing, I disappear. Quietly. Legally. With everyone's best intentions. Memory care by January, assets transferred by spring, and Jake spending the rest of his life thinking he made the right choice. Ruth was quiet again. Then, what do you need from me? A witness. Someone whose word can't be dismissed. When I confront her, I need documentation that will hold up in court. You're going to confront her directly? I'm going to give her a choice. Walk away quietly or face public consequences. But I need leverage that makes walking away the better option. That's dangerous if she panics. She won't. She's too controlled for that. She's been planning this for months. She'll have an exit strategy. I set down my mug. I just need to make that exit more appealing than fighting. Ruth studied me with the expression I'd seen her use on guilty defendants. You've changed. The Mara I knew would have gone straight to the police. The Mara you knew believed the system worked. I met her gaze. I still do. But I also know it fails people like me more often than we admit, so I'm building my own case first. Then, I'll hand it over. And if it scorches your family? Justice is a flame, I said quietly. Homes learn to live with candles. Ruth nodded slowly. Then she pulled out her phone. I'll make some calls, quietly. APS has a good investigator, Delgado. He's careful, thorough, doesn't rush. He'll need to see everything you have. I'll make copies. And Mara? Ruth's voice softened. When this is over, whatever happens, you call me. You don't disappear into that house again. Promise me. I promise. We sat in her chambers, drinking bad coffee. Two old women who'd built careers on believing the law could protect people, now watching it fail in real time. But failure, I'd learned, is just another word for evidence. And evidence is what I did best. The estate attorney's office was too warm, too beige, too designed for comfort, for making difficult decisions feel easy. Jake sat beside me, Sloane on his other side, her hand on his knee, supportive, present, immovable. The attorney, a man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a practiced sympathy, walked us through the documents. This is fairly standard, he said. Durable power of attorney, which allows Jake to make financial and medical decisions if you become incapacitated, updated will with simplified language, healthcare directive, and we've included provisions for long-term care should it become necessary. Long-term care? I asked. That wasn't discussed. Sloane leaned forward. We're just being thorough, Mara, covering all scenarios. I flipped to that section. Memory care facilities. Provisions for asset liquidation to cover costs. Jake named as trustee. This presumes decline, I said carefully. It prepares for possibility, the attorney replied. Most people your age include these provisions. Most people my age haven't been a law professor for 3 decades. Mom, Jake started. I'd like to read through everything, alone, before signing. The attorney glanced at Sloane, who gave a small nod. So subtle Jake probably didn't catch it. But I did. The paralegal hesitated. We usually have family members present to answer questions. I'm a member of the Connecticut Bar, I said quietly. I've reviewed more complex documents than this. I don't need interpretation. I need time. My voice carried the authority of every classroom I'd commanded, every courtroom where I'd been the smartest person present. The paralegal straightened. Of course, Dr. Ellison, take all the time you need. Jake and Sloane left me in the conference room. Through the glass wall, I watched them in the waiting area. Sloane's hand on his arm, her mouth moving, his head nodding. I read every word. The documents were skillfully written, not overtly malicious, but structured to assume my incompetence, to position Jake and, by extension, Sloane, as my protectors and ultimate decision-makers. Once signed, I'd have handed over my autonomy wrapped in legal language so clean it would be nearly impossible to contest. I left the documents unsigned on the table. In the waiting room, Sloane's smile was tight. All done? I need my own attorney to review them first. Mom, we paid for this consultation. Then I'll reimburse you, but I'm not signing today. In the car, the silence was arctic. Sloane drove with careful precision, Jake staring out the window. Then, from the front seat, barely audible, "We'll feather it. She's almost there." My phone, recording in my pocket, caught every word. I smiled to myself in the back seat. Thank you, I thought, for the verb. I chose Sunday morning. Sloane had a routine. Meditation at dawn, then her wellness prep for the week. Jake slept late on Sundays, groggy from Saturday's relaxation protocol. The house was quiet, autumn light filtering through the kitchen windows like a judgment being prepared. I'd asked Ruth to come at 9, Lieutenant Omar Delgado from Adult Protective Services at 9:15. I'd given them copies of everything. The recordings, the photographs, Lila's toxicology report, the dosing journal, the estate documents. At 8:45, I made tea. Real tea. No almonds, no quiet edges. Sloane found me in the living room, the old cassette player on the coffee table, my evidence organized in manila folders with the careful precision of a closing argument. "You're up early," she said. I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. She sat down across from me, yoga clothes pristine, face fresh. Want to talk about it? I do, actually. I pressed play on the cassette. My younger voice filled the room. Caregivers who poison often use language to moralize doses, feathering the dose, quieting the edges, lulling the storm. Sloane went very still. I stopped the tape, then played the recording from my phone. "This should help quiet the edges for you, baby." Her own voice, crystal clear. "That's a unique phrase," I said conversationally. "I coined it in 1999, never published. Only 12 students heard that lecture. You weren't one of them." I paused, but someone was. Sloane's face remained calm, but I saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. "I don't know what you think this proves. I think it proves you studied my work very carefully. Let me show you what else I found." I laid out the photographs one by one, like cards in a winning hand. The legend page, the dosing log, the calendar symbols, the bottles. "This is my private journal," Sloane said, voice tight. "You went through my things. Your private journal documenting a felony. Phase 1. Build dependency. Phase 2. Introduce target. Phase 3. Secure power of attorney. Phase 4. Memory care placement." I met her eyes. "You wrote it out like a dissertation, very thorough. Those are wellness protocols. Dr. Lila Sethi analyzed the contents of your Quiet 2 bottle. Zolpidem derivatives. Sedative hypnotics. Not exactly passion flower." I slid Lila's report across the table. "Daily doses over weeks cause exactly what I experienced. Cognitive impairment, tremors, dependency. And what Jake experiences: controlled anxiety, memory gaps, need for the substance to function." Sloane stood abruptly. "This is insane. You're paranoid. You're confused. Jake!" Her voice rose. "Jake, come down here." I heard him upstairs, moving slowly, groggy. He appeared in the doorway in sweatpants and a t-shirt, eyes unfocused. "What's happening?" "Your mother has had some kind of break," Sloane said, moving to his side. "She's accusing me of I don't even know what. Poisoning? She's been going through my things, recording me, building some conspiracy theory." "Jake," I said calmly, "when did you last take Sloane's drops?" "Last night." "Why? How do you feel right now?" "Tired, foggy. I always feel like this in the morning until—" He trailed off. "Until you take more," I finished for him. "This isn't wellness, sweetheart. It's dependence. She's been giving you those drops for months, making you need them so she could be the one to offer relief." "That's absurd," Sloane began. "Is it?" I cut in. "Jake, look at her journal. October 12th, the night of your accident. She marked it as the night she gave you the strongest dose, the one mixed with medication. She increased it on purpose. And then you got in the car." Jake took the journal with trembling hands. As his eyes moved down the page, the color drained from his face. "Sloane?" His voice was small. "What is this?" "It's not what she's making it sound like." "J, mixing again. Watch." Jake read aloud. "M, slipping. Good." He looked up. "Good. My mother getting worse was good. I was documenting symptoms to help." "Help what?" His voice cracked. "Help us into graves? Mom into a facility? What was the end game, Sloane?" The doorbell rang. Sloane's mask finally cracked. "You called someone." "I called several people," I said, standing carefully, "because this is beyond family now. This is criminal." I opened the door. Ruth stood there in her weekend clothes, but carrying the authority of 30 years on the bench. Behind her, Lieutenant Delgado, quiet and watchful. "Dr. Ellison," Ruth said formally, "you asked us to witness." Sloane's face went through a dozen calculations in 3 seconds. Then she turned to Jake, tears forming with practiced ease. "Baby, you have to believe me. I was trying to help. Your mom was declining, and you were so stressed, and I just wanted to make things easier for everyone." "By poisoning us?" Jake's voice broke. "By documenting it like an experiment?" "It wasn't poison. It was supplements." "Supplements that made me crash my car?" His hands were shaking now. Not from the drops, but from rage, from grief, from the terrible clarity of someone waking from a long dream. "Supplements that made my mother, my brilliant, sharp mother, shuffle around like a ghost?" He turned to me, and I saw tears on his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. Not because I didn't care," his voice failed, "but because I wasn't myself anymore. I couldn't trust my own thoughts." Sloane's expression shifted from tears to something colder. "You're all going to regret this. I have documentation, medical concerns, erratic behavior, paranoid accusations. Any court will see I was acting out of genuine care. Any court will see the toxicology reports," Delgado said quietly, "the dosing journals, the linguistic evidence showing premeditation. and they'll see Dr. Ellison's medical records showing rapid cognitive recovery the moment you stopped medicating her. He held up a tablet. We've been monitoring the situation for 5 days, Miss Vale. You're not the only one who documents. Sloane looked at each of us in turn. The performance was over. What remained was something hard and furious and utterly unrepentant. She would have died anyway, Sloane said flatly. In some facility, confused and alone, her money going to strangers. I would have taken care of Jake, given him the life he deserved. She was just in the way. Jesus Christ, Sloane, Jake whispered. I'm not saying another word without a lawyer, she said, and walked upstairs to pack. We stood in the wreckage of Sunday morning. Ruth spoke quietly with Delgado about next steps: investigation, charges, emergency restraining orders. Jake sat on the couch, head in his hands, trying to reconcile the woman he'd loved with the woman who'd written M. Slipping, good in her neat handwriting. I sat beside him, put my hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, he said again. Mom, I'm so... You were a victim too, I said quietly. She made sure of that. I should have seen it. She's very good at what she does. I squeezed his shoulder. But Jake, listen to me. This isn't your fault. It's hers. And now it's evidence. He looked up, eyes red. What happens now? Now we testify. We document. We let the system I built, that I used to trust, do what it's supposed to do. And if it doesn't? I thought about that. About all the ways I'd seen justice fail. All the times the system protected the wrong people, believed the wrong stories. Then we make it visible anyway, I said. And we survive. Upstairs, we heard Sloane moving around, efficient even in crisis. Lieutenant Delgado's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Ruth. Patrol's outside. We'll escort her out, get a formal statement. Ruth nodded. Then she came and sat on my other side. You did it, she said softly. We did it. I looked at her, then at Jake, then at my hands. Steady now, strong. But it's not over. No, Ruth agreed. Now comes the hard part. What's the hard part? Jake asked. Believing the system will work, I said, when you've seen exactly how it fails. We sat there in autumn light, 3 people who'd lost faith in different ways, waiting to see if justice was more than a word we taught in law school, waiting to see if the system I'd built could save us, or if we'd have to save ourselves. The trial happened in February, when New Haven was frozen and gray, the courthouse steps slick with ice that made me move carefully, hand on Jake's arm. 6 months of pretrial motions. Sloane's lawyers arguing elder confusion, documented medical concerns, benevolent intent, the prosecution countering with toxicology, linguistic analysis, the damning clarity of her own journals. The media loved it. Wellness influencer, accused of poisoning mother-in-law. The comments sections were exactly what you'd expect, half calling her a monster, half insisting I was a bitter old woman jealous of my son's beautiful wife. I didn't read them. I prepared. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more mundane. No dramatic lighting, no musical swells, just fluorescent fixtures and uncomfortable chairs and the slow machinery of justice grinding forward. Sloane sat at the defense table in a dove gray suit, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Her lawyer had coached her well, contrite but not broken, concerned but not guilty. She looked like someone who'd made mistakes, not committed crimes. I testified first, gave the facts without embellishment. The timeline, the symptoms, the discovery, the evidence. The defense tried to paint me as paranoid, confused, vindictive. Isn't it true, Dr. Ellison, that you've had documented cognitive decline? I had documented symptoms while being systematically poisoned. Once the poisoning stopped, so did the symptoms. You were living in your son's home, dependent on his wife's care. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted kindness as conspiracy? No. I met the lawyer's eyes. I've taught evidence analysis for 30 years. I know the difference between interpretation and fact. Lila testified about the toxicology. Ruth testified about the legal documents. Delgado testified about the investigation. And then Jake took the stand. He looked smaller in the witness box, thinner. 6 months sober from Sloane's supplements had cleared his mind but hollowed his face. He wore a navy suit, his father's suit, I realized. The one we'd saved. The prosecutor walked him through it gently. The timeline of his relationship with Sloane, the introduction of the wellness drops, the gradual changes, the fog, the forgetfulness, the dependency. Mr. Ellison, did you know what was in the supplements your wife gave you? No, she said they were herbal, natural. I trusted her. When did you realize something was wrong? Jake's voice wavered. When I read her journal, when I saw the symbols next to my name, next to my mother's name, when I understood we were projects, not people. He looked at Sloane. She stared back, expression neutral. I loved her. I thought she loved me, but she just managed me, like a variable in an experiment. Can you tell the court about the night of your accident? Jake took a breath. She gave me the drops before dinner, said I seemed tense. I remember feeling really drowsy afterward, but she encouraged me to drive. Said the client was important. The rain wasn't that bad. I barely remember getting in the car. His voice broke. I woke up in the hospital, and she was there, crying, playing the perfect wife, and I believed her. What do you believe now? I believe she tried to kill me. Jake's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. Maybe not that night specifically, but eventually. The drops, the dependence, the impaired judgment. It was all leading somewhere. And my mom would have been declared incompetent, institutionalized, her assets transferred. He shook his head. I would have helped it happen. Because I wasn't in control of my own thoughts anymore. The defense cross-examined, trying to shake him, suggesting he was bitter, manipulated by his mother, exaggerating symptoms. Jake didn't waver. At the end, he looked directly at me from the witness stand. Mom taught me what justice means, he said quietly. She taught me that truth matters, that evidence matters, that we don't get to rewrite reality just because it's inconvenient. His voice strengthened. Today, I stand here to give that back to her, to give her the justice she taught me to value. The courtroom was silent. The verdict came on a Thursday. Guilty on 2 counts of felony elder abuse. Guilty on criminal poisoning. Guilty on fraud. Not guilty on attempted murder. Insufficient evidence of intent to kill, though the jury clearly believed she'd intended harm. Sloane's face remained blank as the verdict was read. No tears. No breakdown. Just the cold acceptance of someone who'd gambled and lost. The judge sentenced her to 8 years, with provisions for restitution and permanent restraining orders. Outside the courthouse, Jake and I stood on the steps while reporters shouted questions. We didn't answer. Just stood there in the February cold, 2 people who'd survived something that shouldn't have been survivable. Is it over? Jake asked quietly. The trial is, I said. The rest we'll figure out. He turned to me, and I saw my son again. Not the managed, foggy version Sloane had created, but the real Jake. Still wounded, still healing, but present. Mom, he said, if you'll let me, I want to take care of you now. The way you always took care of me. The right way. I didn't rush into an embrace. Instead, I reached up and placed my hand on his cheek, feeling the stubble, the warmth, the realness of him. It was forgiveness without words. It was also a beginning. 3 months later, we'd built something resembling normal. Jake lived 4 blocks away now, in a modest apartment he could finally afford without Sloane's influencer money propping it up. He saw a therapist twice a week, a licensed physician trained to heal, not a wellness blogger selling comfort disguised as expertise. We had breakfast together on Sundays. He'd arrive with groceries and attempt to cook, burning pancakes with such consistency it became a running joke. "I think you're doing this on purpose," I said one morning, scraping charcoal into the trash. "I genuinely don't understand what I'm doing wrong." He stared at the pan like it had betrayed him. "You're using too high heat and not enough patience." Story of my life. But he smiled when he said it. We'd walk after breakfast, slow walks, because my hips still ached in cold weather, and Jake still had days when the residual anxiety made him shaky. We'd loop through East Rock Park, watching the seasons change, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes we talked about Sloan. The trial, the aftermath, the way trauma leaves fingerprints on your life even after the danger has passed. "Do you hate her?" Jake asked one day. I considered that. No, I hate what she did, what she tried to do, but hating her, I shook my head. That would mean she still has space in my life. She doesn't. "I hate her sometimes," Jake admitted. "Then I feel guilty for hating her. Then I'm angry that I feel guilty. It's exhausting. Healing isn't linear." I squeezed his hand. "You're allowed to feel all of it." We walked in comfortable silence. A family passed us. Young parents with a toddler, laughing at something. Jake watched them with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I thought I'd have that by now," he said quietly. "The family, the kids, the whole picture." "You still can." "Yeah." He didn't sound convinced. "First, I have to trust someone again. Trust myself again." "You will. Give it time." "How much time did it take you? After Dad died?" I thought about that. About the years after I lost my husband. The loneliness. The slow rebuilding of a life that made sense without him. "I'm still figuring it out," I admitted. "Some losses don't have timelines. They just become part of who you are." We walked on. On a Tuesday in May, Jake came over with tea. Real tea. Chamomile. Steeped properly. No almonds, no hidden additives. Just tea. He set the cup in front of me with ceremony, sitting down across the kitchen table. "I've been practicing," he said. I took a sip. It was good. Simple. Safe. "Perfect," I said. "Yeah?" He looked pleased, then serious. "Mom, I need you to know something. As long as I'm the one making tea, you'll always be safe here. No one will hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." My throat tightened. "Jake." "I mean it. I know I failed you before. I let her in. I let her do what she did. I chose wrong. You were a victim too." "I know. But I'm not anymore. And neither are you." He reached across the table, took my hand. We survived. Together. And we're going to keep surviving. I looked at my son. My complicated, imperfect, deeply good son, and felt something settle in my chest. Not closure, not forgetting, but something else. Peace, tentative and fragile, but real. "You came back to me," I said softly. "My little boy came back to me. Not perfect, but true." "I'm trying," he said. "That's all anyone can do." We sat there drinking tea as the afternoon light shifted. Two people learning how to be a family again, how to trust the simple things, a cup of tea, a conversation, the promise that tomorrow would be safer than yesterday. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. I live by the water now. A small cottage in Branford, right on the Sound. Jake helped me find it, insisted on it, actually. "You need space. That's yours," he'd said. "No ghosts, no bad memories. Just you and the ocean." He was right.